I'm looking at the Straits Times. The Straits Times is the New Sunday Times, a newspaper out of Hong Kong. And the headline is Malaysian Airlines cuts costs to stay competitive. It starts out with a quote. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain ABC speaking. It is free seating this morning on our flight as the plane is only half full, but I will appreciate it if you occupy the window seats so our competitors think the flight is full. Thank you. And then it goes on. You laugh until your sides ache, but it's not such a rib-tickling affair for airlines when they have to pilot their way out of the turbulence, which has now beset the industry. And then basically it's a story about how Malaysia Airlines is having to cut. Their revenues were down 12.1%. They lost RM $3.79 billion. I'm assuming RM is renminbi, the Chinese currency, because this is a story out of Hong Kong, that they are going to be selling 6 aircraft in the current financial year, 2 B747s, B747-300, a B737-200, a DC-10, and an Airbus A300. And that they are bringing in a guy to run the airline who has no airline experience, but has experience as basically a corporate raider. Now, there are two things, I have not weighed in yet on this Malaysian Airlines, where did the damn plane go thing yet. But I'm going to now. I'm a pilot. I'm not a commercial pilot, but I know how airplanes work. And there are two theories that make a certain amount of sense to me. The theory that only partially makes sense to me is that there was some sort of a fire in the cockpit. There was some sort of a meltdown in the plane that caused the pilots, when they program their ACAR system, when they program their automatic flight system, very often, typically, pilots put in an A program and a B program. The A program is where we're going. We're going to fly from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. And then you put in a B program that takes you back to Kuala Lumpur. And then about halfway through your trip, you reprogram that B program to take you to some other airport that's nearby. Or even periodically, you can reprogram that. And that B program is there in case you have an emergency, in case you lose an engine, in case you hit really severe turbulence and start losing your hydraulics or something. If anything happens, then you simply push a button on your autopilot, and the autopilot switches from your A program to your B program, and now the plane is flying itself back to an airport that's nearby rather than all the way to Beijing. This is standard operating practice. So if the pilots were in the cockpit and they had an emergency, and that emergency was starting to take out their systems, for example, if it had taken out the transponder and then the ACAR system, a smart pilot would have pushed that button and said, let's go back to Kuala Lumpur, and the plane would have executed that left turn. Now, here's the problem with that theory. The problem with that theory is that if they had properly programmed that ACAR systems for that return to Kuala Lumpur, that plane would have automatically landed in Kuala Lumpur. Current generation Airbuses are capable of going from 30,000 feet to landing at an airport without the pilot ever touching anything. And it didn't. It made a turn and then it kept on going. Which leads me to my theory. And now this is not, I don't feel strongly about this. I don't believe this with a high level of certainty. But I'm surprised that nobody else is bringing it up. And I think the reason nobody else is bringing it up is because it has to do with corporate America. Malaysian Airlines was in trouble financially. They had brought in a guy to slash their budget, which means laying off people. And they were selling off planes, which means laying off pilots. Who are you going to lay off? Well, Malaysia is basically a dictatorship. It's not a good democracy. You got a guy running the country who's, tin pot dictator. And this pilot of this plane, if the news reports I've read are correct, was a big fan of a small d Democratic opponent to the dictator of Malaysia, who was prosecuted the day of the flight or the day before the flight, was prosecuted for being homosexual, which is illegal in Malaysia, and was sent to prison for it. And according to some news reports, this specifically was in the Daily Mail, the British newspaper, the pilot actually went to the trial of his political hero, the guy who went to jail, who was the opposition leader. Now, I don't think the theory was that's enough for the pilot to want to commit suicide. I don't think so. I think here's what happened. I think the pilot was a supporter of the opposition. That got back to the government and to the management of the airline. They decided, hey, we're doing cutbacks. We've got to get rid of some of our pilots. We're going to get rid of this guy. And the day that he flew, given that the management was so incompetent, I'm willing to bet that we're going to someday find out that he had been laid off that day or fired. And that might be a good reason to take an airplane and go fly out to the middle of the Indian Ocean and ditch it. He was in his 50s. It was the end of his career. This was the only thing he loved and cared about was aviation. That air simulator, that airplane simulator that he had in his garage, he built by hand. It was homemade. But Malaysia doesn't want to say this because it's such a badly run country, and the company doesn't want to say this because it's such a badly run company. And I've been in Malaysia. I've been in Kuala Lumpur. They didn't want to say it because it's embarrassing. And I predict this someday is going to come out. That the result of this crash, that the provocation for this crash was corporate cutbacks. And that's why the corporate media in America is not talking about it.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
Now, I will admit that sounds like an absolutely wackadoodle conspiracy theory, and it may well be. We'll see. So Shane just shared with me this story by Chris Goodfellow, published over at Wired.com. It's titled A Startlingly Simple Theory About the Missing Malaysia Airlines Jet. And it answers one of the questions that I raised about, well, what if there was a fire? Why didn't the ACAR system, why didn't the autopilot continue taking them to an airport? And this pilot, this guy who is a commercial pilot, I am not, I'm a private pilot. This guy who is a commercial pilot, he says that, if you had a serious fire, and he talks actually about a couple of cases where this happened, where the front wheel, the front tire, was on fire. This was a heavy plane that took a long, long takeoff. That's the kind of thing that can catch a tire on fire. And then the fire comes up into the wheel well, and the tire on fire is blowing smoke through the wheel well into the plane. And it's very toxic smoke, and first of all, a fire could spread, but secondly, just the smoke could be enough to kill everybody on the plane. And so he said the first thing that the pilots would do is they'd pull the main bus. They'd pull the power, basically kill the power to the whole plane. Now, the engines would continue to run. It would kill the power to everything on the flight deck. And you could manually fly the plane using hydraulics. And he said this might account for why the guy flew the plane up to 45,000 feet, maybe trying to get into a low oxygen environment and put the fire out. But then at 45,000 feet, you're flying above the airplane's, the envelope within which an airplane normally operates. The air is so thin at that altitude that you can't get much lift under the wings. So your stall speed window becomes very, very narrow. And if the plane stalled and spun out, or just stalled and dipped, it might take 20,000 feet to recover. So it falls really, really fast in a stall. Over 1 minute, it drops 20,000 feet, about 4 miles. And then it's got enough speed that the pilot can pull it out of the dive. Or the plane might just level itself. A plane, if you do nothing to it, will always fly straight and level and follow the heading that it's pointed, with variations for the wind around it. And so it may be that by that point in time, everybody on the plane was dead from the smoke and the fire. And the buses had been pulled, so the plane was not, responding to anything. There was nobody in the plane who could make a cell phone call. There was nothing because everybody was toast. And then the plane just flew for 7 hours till it ran out of fuel and ditched in the ocean. That makes a lot of sense to me, too. I didn't get the pulling the bus thing because I was wondering, if he'd programmed this into the flight control system, why didn't it continue to take him there? Okay, you pull the main bus, you're going to kill that, too. So we'll see. Time will tell. But it may well be that this pilot was an absolute hero, that he was trying to bring his plane back safely, and the fire was just too big for him. So I'm thinking of recalibrating the airline job cut theory. That sounds a little wackier in the context of this.